This week, I'll show you how to mix speedlights and studio strobes.
Adorama TV presents Exploring Photography with Mark Wallace, where you will learn innovative techniques on shooting a wide range of photography. Here's your host, Mark Wallace.
Hi everybody, welcome to Adorama TV. I'm Mark Wallace. Well, I'm here with Casey, and we're going to tackle the question of why don't my speedlights work with my studio strobes. Now, this comes from a lot of comments I've seen on YouTube and people that have posted questions to me on Facebook or sent those to me at askmark@adorama.com. And the scenario is almost always the same. It's people that have been using speedlights off camera for a while and have decided to upgrade and add a studio strobe. And usually it's just one. They're starting out with one studio strobe. So what I've tried to recreate here is an off-camera speedlight. This is a Nikon speedlight. I have a Nikon camera with a commander here that's going to trigger that, as well as a studio strobe. Now this could be Nikon or Canon. It doesn't really matter. The principles are exactly the same. Could work for Sony or Pentax, Olympus. Just insert your favorite camera brand. It will all work the same. So the question is, why aren't my studio strobes firing correctly? And so almost always when I dig into the comments or the question, what I find is the culprit is a misunderstanding of how the optical slave works. So let me tell you what an optical slave is. On almost every single studio strobe, there's a little teeny sensor that's somewhere on the strobe, and what it does is it looks for other flashes that are firing, and it can be any flash. It could be a speedlight or a studio strobe, it doesn't matter. And so what happens is anytime a flash fires, so like this one, when it fires, it sees that flash firing, and this flash is triggered by it. And so as soon as it sees a flash fire, bam, that studio strobe will fire. And so the thinking is, hey, I've been shooting with off-camera speedlights for a long time using my remote module, my pop-up flash as a commander, or however you're doing that. And what I'll do is I will trigger my speedlight. That speedlight will flash. And when the speedlight flashes, it will make that flash fire, and everything will be in sync. But what you find out is it just doesn't work. And so you run into all kinds of problems where it looks like the studio strobe isn't showing up in the picture. It's firing, but it's just not showing up in the picture. So what gives? What's the deal? Well, the reason is the optical slave is seeing something called the preflash. Let's take a closer look at the preflash.
When you're using an off-camera speedlight in TTL mode, several things happen when you press the shutter release. First, the controller on your camera sends a signal to the flash. Then the flash fires. This first flash is called a preflash. Light from the preflash is reflected off the subject and into your camera's lens. This happens because your camera needs to meter the light coming from your flash. It's known as TTL because the light from the flash is traveling through the lens. Then the shutter on your camera opens and the camera sends another signal to your flash. This signal tells the flash how powerful it should be based on the preflash, and the flash fires a second time. It's important to note that when your speedlight is in TTL mode, the flash fires twice. A pre-flash for metering and a second flash when the exposure is made. To the naked eye, both of these flashes look like a single flash because everything happens incredibly fast.
Well, now that we know about the pre-flash, let's talk about how it can mess things up. Now, before I do that, let me show you this setup I have here. What I'm trying to emulate is a setup that is very common for somebody that is adding a studio strobe to a speedlight off-camera flash kind of setup. So I have a Nikon camera here with an SU800. This is a remote commander. Now, this could be a Canon, it could be a Pentax, it could be an Olympus, it could be maybe a Sony, it doesn't matter. All the principles are the exact same thing. So what we normally would have here is the thinking that, hey, I've had my off-camera flash, my speedlight working just fine for years, and what I want to do is take a picture, and when this flash fires, it will make the optical slave see that flash, and this will fire, and everything will trigger, and it'll be great. But we know that's not going to work correctly because when this triggers this, it will actually send a pre-flash. When the pre-flash fires, this flash will fire at the same time, and this will only fire when the shutter is open. But by that time, this flash is already fired, and everything is all wacky, and so it just doesn't work. Well, we can fix that by doing several things. But before we do that, let me talk about the camera settings that I have. Now, I've already metered Casey right here at f16 exactly. Now, if you're not sure about how to use a light meter, check out Digital Photography 1-on-1, episode 27. I go into all of that. But this is already set up. This is metered at f16. I have my camera set to manual mode. I have it set at ISO 200 and an aperture value of 16. So I want to just take a picture, and we'll see what happens. Now, we know already that this isn't going to work, but let's just prove it. So I'll go over here, and Casey, look right at me. I'm going to take a picture here, and sure enough, it doesn't work. So what we have here is we have just a little bit of this light showing up in the picture, but this flash, even though it fired, it didn't show up in the picture because the pre-flash made it fire too early. Well, what can we do? Well, one of the things that you might be thinking is, well, hey, I shoot in manual mode. So let's try that. So I'm going to take my SU800. I'm going to change this to say, make that Speedlight shoot in manual mode. Now that should work just fine, right? Well, let's check and see. So I'll come back here. I'm going to take another photo here. And when I do that, hey, it looks like it worked just fine. Well, maybe it worked just fine. If I look at that picture, it looks like it worked just fine. But watch what happens when I start moving my camera around and moving to different distances. So I'm going to come back just a little bit farther here, and I'll take another shot here. Well, that one didn't work. You can see that the studio strobe doesn't show up. I'll shoot a horizontal shot. We'll take a picture here. Huh, that one worked just fine. Well, what's the problem? The problem is, even though that this flash right here, my Speedlight, is on manual mode, this SU800, this on-camera commander, has to communicate with this flash using infrared signals. And so what happens is, when this signal is sent to that flash, if this flash sees that signal, if that optical slave sees that infrared signal, it's going to flash. And so what was happening is, when I had my flash to the side like this, that was sending a signal where this could see it. When I had it horizontal, or maybe a little bit away, or if I came forward, it just wasn't seeing that infrared signal. And so sometimes it was working, and sometimes it wasn't. And I get that in comments a lot of, why is it sometimes working and sometimes not? Well, maybe it's because sometimes your optical slave is seeing the infrared signal, sometimes it's not. And when it doesn't see it, it works as you would expect. When it does see it, it's all wonky. So what's the solution to make this work every single time and get perfect photos? Well, the best thing to do is get a radio trigger that's made for this kind of thing. And what I prefer to use are the Pocket Wizard Plus 3s or the Pocket Wizard Mini and Flexes. So let's take a look at that next. All right, let's talk about a couple solutions to this problem. Now, the solution that I really like is to use a radio trigger instead of a line of sight or infrared trigger. And the reason for that is it's not going to mess up your optical slave. And also, you can put flashes behind walls and doors and shoot at greater distances. And so the radio triggers that I use are Pocket Wizards. There's a couple of different flavors. The ones I'll show you at first, these are the Pocket Wizard Plus 3s. Now, what I've done here is I have a Pocket Wizard Plus 3 on my camera that's going to send a radio signal to the Pocket Wizard Plus 3 on my Speedlight. Now, you'll always need two radios, one to send and one to receive. And what this will do is this will trigger this remote Speedlight in full manual mode. So I've set my Speedlight in manual mode. That's going to fire. Now, there's no pre-flash because it's in manual mode. And so what will happen is that will be picked up by the optical slave on my studio strobe, and everything is going to work just fine every single time. So anytime I push this, everything's going to fire. Even though I don't have a radio on this, the optical slave is working for me. So let me just show you really quickly. So Casey, look right at me. Beautiful. So the vertical shots work just fine. The horizontal shots work just fine. It doesn't matter if I get really close. So here is Casey's eyeballs almost. So we're so close. Here we go. Good. So we have that. And so you can see that I can move around. I can go anywhere. I don't have to worry about those signals being messed up. There's another thing that I could use if I wanted to add TTL metering to my Speedlights. So maybe you're somebody that likes to mix TTL with full manual mode. And so Pocket Wizard does have the Pocket Wizard Mini and Flex, both for Canon and Nikon. Now these are definitely more expensive than the Plus 3s, but they give you the ability to use TTL metering to mix these with studio strobes and speedlights and adjust the power output of your strobes from the top of your camera. So there's a lot of options there. Well, there you have it. The reason that your studio strobes and your speedlights might not be getting along, and a very simple solution is just to get rid of those infrared line of sight signals and use a radio trigger instead, and it'll work just fine. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Remember, if you have a question about photography, you can send it to me at askmark@adorama.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a single episode. Hi everybody, welcome to Adorama TV. I'm Mark Wallace. Excuse me. Can you hear that? Mark Wallace has a breakdown on set.
Adorama TV is brought to you by Adorama, your best source for the equipment and knowledge you need. For all the latest photography, video, and computer gear, visit Adorama.com. Place your order by 7 p.m. and it ships the same day. Plus, the next time you're in New York City, be sure to visit our store located on 18th Street between 5th and 6th Avenue. Check out the Adorama Rental Company for professional cameras, lighting, computers, and more. We'll help you make the best selection to match your needs while giving you the knowledge to achieve the best outcome from your rental. Adorama is your complete solution for equipment, printing, training, and more. Adorama, more than a camera store.